Aristotle was a conservative thinker. His idea was based on observation, and he was very realist and very much practical. Now he, most of things he justified what he saw. For example, slavery. He justified slavery and he said slavery is useful, slavery is relevant, slavery is desirable, right? And that time, if you look at, slavery was a part of Athenian economy. Now, if you look at Aristotle's view on women, traditionally, if you see that women have been subjugated all around the world, in all culture, right? And so, of course, it was in Athens, women had no citizenship, along with others, like slave had no citizenship, foreigner had no citizenship, right? Old age, children, metics, sophists, they were not citizen of Athens. And he said woman is unequal to man. He justified why woman is unequal to man. He said woman is an important part of polis. You cannot deny their importance because they are half of the population. So women should get education, proper education, but they should not get citizenship, right? They should not be allowed to engage in the collective work of the city-state. Right? Now, why? He argued that, look, women can do best when they perform in the private sphere, family, right? Family. And on the other hand, he argued that man, in their power, in their energy, in their aesthetics, right? They are more superior than women. Okay? Man is a martial race, but woman is not. While woman is not. Woman lacks these qualities. He said, woman does not deserve to be citizen because woman lack deliberative capacity. What woman lacks? Deliberative capacity. Woman lack intellect. Right? And therefore, woman should be not allowed in the collective affair of the state. On the other hand, domestic work is also very important. Domestic work is also important, right? And women should be allowed to, play a better role in the domestic affair within the household, right? Okay? Because if you look at within the household, it is a private realm where there is a hierarchy between man, wife, and children. Okay? And it is a natural hierarchy. It is not hierarchy which has been created. It is a natural hierarchy. Now, what happens in nature? The superior rules over the inferior, the stronger over the weak, okay? And the soul over the body. Man being superior, stronger, right? Though it should naturally rule over woman. The man commands and the woman obey. The man commands and woman obey. Further, he said that man has religion and woman lack this quality. Man has religion, but woman lack these qualities. And therefore, woman should be at the secondary place, like subjugated within the city estates, right? And woman should not get citizenship. So, of course, if you look at his idea of woman was basically based on prejudice, right? What idea, right? So that was his view on woman. Right? So write few lines. Aristotle was a conservative thinker and a status quoist. What do you mean by status quoist? A status quoist means they want to maintain the existing system. That is a status quoist, right? Right. Conservative is not regular. Okay. Unlike Plato, who was radical in his thought, established an equality between man and woman. Aristotle, full stop, Aristotle idea was based on observation. Aristotle idea was based on observation, and he portrayed a stereotypical view on women. And he portrayed a stereotypical view on women. He justified inequality between man and woman. He justified inequality between man and woman. In the paragraph, and right, for Aristotle, man, M-E-N, man, I'm writing about the entire social community, man are masculine in their power, man are masculine in their power, energy, sexuality, courage, and virtue. Men are masculine in their power, energy, sexuality, courage, and virtue. Women lack these qualities. Women lack these qualities and don't deserve to be citizen. And don't deserve to be a citizen. Okay. However, Aristotle did not ignore women. However, Aristotle did not ignore women. However, Aristotle did not ignore women as they constituted 50% of city population. They constituted 50% of city population. Full stop. Ignoring them might cause political instability and vulnerability for the city-state. Ignoring them might cause political instability and vulnerability for the city-state. He said women should be properly educated. Women should be properly educated and they should perform better role in the household. They should perform better role in the household. In the household. Now change the paragraph. Okay. In the household, the role of woman is important. In the household, the role of woman is important. अब तुम देख रहे हो कि मैं कहां पर पैराग्राफ खत्म कर रहा हूं, कैसे शुरू कर रहा हूं. हाउसहोल्ड से शुरू किया, हाउसहोल्ड से शुरू कर रहा हूं. राइट. सो लुक एट दिस मेक्स अ लिंक बिटवीन. गॉट आइडिया? सो यू लर्न कि कैसे लिखना है. पैराग्राफ कहां छोड़ना है, वहां छोड़ना है. कि अगर छोड़ना है तो हमें कुछ मेंशन ये करना है, नेक्स्ट पैराग्राफ में वही चीजें शुरुआत में लानी चाहिए ताकि वो लिंक बनाता है. देन यू स्ट्रेच your paragraph, no issue at all, right? So what have you written? In the household, the role of woman is important. She is important. She is an important teacher for cultivating moral virtue. She is an important teacher for cultivating moral virtue for their children. For their children. Within the family or in the household, the role of woman is important as she cultivates moral virtue she cultivates moral virtue for children and slave. There is a natural hierarchy within the household. There is a natural hierarchy within the household. There is a natural hierarchy within the household. It is a private realm. It is a private realm. R-E-A-L-M, realm, private sphere, right? It is a private sphere. Or a sphere of particular. Or a sphere of particular. Like better rules over inferior. Like better rules over inferior. Like better rules over inferior, comma, stronger over the weak, stronger over the weak, and the soul over the body, and the soul over the body, comma, man being superior, stronger and better, man being superior, stronger and better, they rule over woman. Now look at, this is Aristotle, who had prejudiced view about woman. Now even today, there is a such view prevails, isn't it? Yes. What is a man's chauvinism? Male chauvinism is like, man is superior, natural is superior. That is called man's chauvinism, Well, I teach you patriarchy, I'll introduce the word male chauvinism, right? Okay, daughter killing state, okay. That is called Demaru state. Have you heard about Demaru state? Demaru, yeah. Not Bimaru. Bimaru, everyone knows, right? Bimaru is very old. Now the new term has been coined, not new, but it has been older, right? Few years, right? Demaru state. Demaru state means the daughter killing state. Now let me tell you, that is not a state which is poor economically. No. These are the states which are actually economically stronger, right? Infrastructure is better. Like look at Haryana, right? Economically stronger and infrastructure is better. And if you find daughter killing, the one of the highest is in Haryana, right? Okay, so look at this idea of Aristotle. अगर Aristotle का नाम हटा लूं तो ऐसे जैसे हम आपस में दोस्त बात करते हैं ना गांव में, ऐसे लग रहा है, नहीं लग रहा है कि देखो मैन इज सुपीरियर, मैन वुमन लैक्स. आज भी बोलते हैं वुमन को, तुम्हारे पास दिमाग ही नहीं है, नहीं बोलते हैं. Look That's I'm telling you what is happening in general. Don't take personally. Don't take it personally. But generally it is in practice that women are degraded, right? Right? In practice by the male, right? Projected as a weak, right? Inferior, right? Weaker, isn't it? Okay? Now change the paragraph and write, okay. For Aristotle, women lack reason and deliberative capacity. Women lack reason and deliberative capacity. Therefore, they are not suitable. Therefore, they are not suitable for the common good. They are not suitable for the common good and the collective affair of the state. Collective affair of the state. Further, women are engaged largely in the domestic work. Further, women are engaged largely in domestic work and child rearing. Further, women are engaged in domestic work and child rearing. They lack time for participation in the collective activity of the polis. They lack time for participation in collective affair of the polis. Got the idea? Now change the paragraph and write, on the other hand, write about male. On the other hand, male have superior virtue, hence he is a dominant partner. Male have superior virtue, hence he is a dominant partner. Although relationship between male and female within the household is interdependent, although the relationship between male and female within the household is interdependent, like friends, but they are not equal. But they are not equal. But they are not equal. Husband-wife relationship is different from the governor and governed. The husband-wife relationship is different from the governor and governed. Because the letter keeps changing, because the letter LATTR, right? The letter keeps changing, but the former continues. But the former continues. Because the letter keeps changing, but the former continues. Governor changes na all the ways, right? But husband-wife relation continues, right? So continue. Aristotle argues husband is naturally gifted for command. Aristotle argues husband is naturally gifted for command. Husband is naturally gifted for command and the wife for obedience. And wife for obedience. ठीक है. This relationship is exercised. This relationship is exercised in the interest of the household. This relationship is exercised in the interest of household where men are the head of the family. I mean, I'm talking about in general, where men are the head of the family. So look at his idea of, relationship between man and woman, right? Or the view on woman. If you look at, even in the 20th century, John Rawls wrote a book, A Theory of Justice. Now, even in that theory of justice, John Rawls argued that, the head of the family shall be the part of the contract, right? When they will conclude the social justice or the justice, right? So look at, his idea was so prominent and so based on observation, right? Now still there are still this idea. However, if you look at, he was unlike his teacher, who had a radical view, who had to vision, who had a vision to establish equality between man and woman. But look at, his idea was very conservative, right? Very status quoist. So Aristotle's view on women we have done. Okay? Now I'll talk about Aristotle's view on property, but बात कर लूंगा, लिखवाऊंगा नहीं. ऑलरेडी हम लोग बात कर चुके हैं एरिस्टोटल्स प्रॉपर्टी का ऊपर. थोड़ा मैं I'll talk about and then I'll move. You write your own, because when we talk about Aristotle's view on property, when we discussed already Plato's view on property. Now Plato, if you look at, for Plato, the guardian class should not possess private property, and he saw private property is a source of corruption, right? On the other hand, if you look at, Aristotle has very opposite view, and he saw property as a source of multiple virtue, many virtue property has, right? So he talked about two types of property. One is natural property, another is unnatural property. What is natural property? The fishing, right? The bees, the birds, the pet, slave, these all are natural property, right? And second is unnatural property. Unnatural property means house, gold, right? The jewelry, right? Jewelry, these all are unnatural property. And he justified the position of property. He said property has several virtues, right? For example, property gives sense of stability. If you have more property, you have more, willing to work to protect it, right? To promote it, to make it more, right? So property gives a sense of achievement. Property also, motivates people to do hard work, right? It is also source of political stability. If you have property, you can engage in political activity of the state, right? And in absence of property, you have nothing. You can't do anything, right? You can be a philanthropic only when you have property. So it also gives you a sense of altruism, to do welfare for the other. So he had seen many virtues of property, right? And therefore, unlike Plato, Aristotle justified the position of property. Got the idea? Right? So this you can see, everything is written there, right? I will not teach you the theory of property separately, but yeah, many philosophers, when we will discuss their idea of property. Like, for example, Plato we discuss, Aristotle we discuss. Now, similarly, when we will discuss, for example, John Locke, we'll talk about his idea of property. Right? When we'll discuss Karl Marx, we'll discuss his idea of property. Right? How socialists viewed on property. Right? So, look, In political theory, what happens? We take a one idea, one concept, like property. And then we discussed what this concept is all about and how many philosopher has discussed this idea of property. Right? Okay? Similarly, if you look at, we have not entered into the modern philosophy, but in modern philosophy, we'll talk about several philosophers and their idea on democracy. Like J.S. Mill idea of representative democracy, Locke idea of democracy. ठीक है? Theory में हम क्या करते? Theory में we read democracy, right? And we read the philosopher's view, and also the new, evolved ideas, right? For example, if you look at many institutions, like have you heard about VDAM report, varieties of democracy report? I told you that to see. I think I must have told, in introductory class when I taught you democracy in a very short. बोला था फ्रीडम हाउस, VDAM report, Pew Research, इसको जरा देखिए, right? And then see how they define democracy. So look at that, we study in political theory. And if your political philosophy is not so strong, let me tell you, वहां पर दिक्कत हो जाती है, क्योंकि जहां पर मैं यहाँ के स्कॉलर का नाम बोलूंगा और वहां पर मैं एग्जैक्टली वही बोलूंगा. I'll not talk about the entire history of that philosopher, right? अभी तो क्या है कि आप जान रहे कि भाई एरिस्टोटल कैसे बोल रहा है, right? एक्सेप्ट तैयार हो गया कि his idea was based on very much practical and observation. What was practice? He justified most of the things. He justified. He was a realistic thinker. He was a pragmatic thinker, unlike his, teacher Plato, right? ठीक है. तो theory में ऐसा नहीं होता. Theory में one concept you take and then you define and talk about different philosophers, what they argue. His view on constitution. Now, if you look at today, most of the countries of the world have constitution. So, can you summarize property theory again? Whose property theory? Aristotle's property theory, or Plato's property theory, or theory of property, or the entire theory of property? Tell me. Aristotle. Look at Aristotle justified the private possession of property. He saw property has several virtues, unlike his teacher, who considered property is a source of corruption. Right? Aristotle argued that property gives you sense of achievement, it motivates to work hard, right? It is also source of political stability. Even Aristotle justified the status of citizenship on the basis of property, right? And if you look at property, also is a source of honor. If you have property, you will be honored, right? If you don't have property, you won't be honored, right? Look at that, is a reality. That is a reality in our society. Okay? And it is also, give a sense of charity, altruism, right? So that he actually, talked about different qualities of property. As far as, the division, he divided property into two parts: natural property and unnatural property. What is natural property? The natural property is like pond, like fish, like pet. These all are natural property. Or tree, if you have, that is a natural property, right? Slaves, all are natural property. Unnatural property, now for example, the goods you have, the the arms you have, right? Jewelry you have, these all are artificial property, unnatural property, right? So he divided property into two parts, and he justified property, unlike his teacher Plato, who saw property as a source of corruption, right? And He rejected possession of property for the guardian class. ठीक है? Yes, making sense about the idea of property? Now let me talk about constitution. Now even if you look at the contemporary world, most of the country have constitution. Whether they are democratic or not democratic, look at China, it has constitution, or Russia has constitution. Now look at India has constitution, US has constitution, France has constitution. So in modern world, if you look at most of the country have constitution. Okay? And constitution is a basics, the basics on which the entire government is based and functions, right? Now look at the Aristotle time and Aristotle era. Aristotle studied 158 constitution. He is known as father of constitutionalism, right? As I told you that except the commentary on Athenian constitution, we don't have access to any his writing commentary on constitution. For him, constitution was different, had a different meaning, right, than the contemporary world. Now in contemporary world, constitution means a written document, right? But for Aristotle, constitution means the government, the form of life, right? Civic virtue. That was the constitution, right? And if you look at the constitution, he divided the entire constitution into 6 types, right? 6 types, right? So what was the basis for division of this constitution or typology of the constitution? The first ground is how many people rule, right? So number of person, how many person rule, right? If one person rule, and if that ruling is good, if one person rule for the welfare of the people, right, they respect opinion of their own people, right, then that is called monarchy, right? So that is called correct form, right? But when there is a deviated form, right, when this one person rule is not good for the all, this one person uses the public office for the private gain, right, and does not follow, does not respect the public opinion, right, and rule on the basis of his own decrees, that he called tyranny. That he called tyranny, right? Now if you look at, if number of person are few to rule, right, and the ruling is good for the welfare of the people, respect law, right, respect the public opinion, do use public office for the public gain, for the welfare of the people, that is called aristocracy. That is called aristocracy. But if these few people, uses the public office for the private gain, right, not respecting the public opinion and the rule of law, then it is called oligarchy. This is called oligarchy, right? Then what if many people are in government, many people rules, right? Again, the characteristics was, the ground was again, look whether they are good, then it is polity. But if it is bad, then it is democracy. So democracy is one of the worst form of government. Democracy is one of the worst form of government, as Aristotle argued. Right. So what is basically constitution for him? Constitution means, right, the form of government, right, the way of life, and civic virtue. Now let me tell you, the written constitution is same. Written constitution is basically the written form of this idea, right? And if you look at, he said, if the constitution change, that means if the government form of government changes, then everything changes. It changes way of the life, and it changes the idea of civic virtue. Let me give you an example. Look at the government in Afghanistan before Taliban 2.0, before August 2021. It was a different form of government. What was the government? It was democracy, right? Whether you criticize democracy of Afghanistan of that time, that is a different point altogether. But look at the democracy in Afghanistan from 2001 to 2021, right, led by the other leaders like Karzai, right, had, promoted different kinds of way of life, like freedom for women, right, to participate in market, go to the college, right, participate in the political affairs. But look at, so that is till August 2021. But when the government changed, you have Taliban 2.0, and you see the government changed, the way of life in Afghanistan also changed. The civic virtue also changed, right? So look, for Aristotle, the constitution changed, everything changes, right? So for him, the constitution means the form of government, the way of life, and the civic virtue. And he divided constitution into 6 types, that is monarchy and tyranny, aristocracy and oligarchy, polity and democracy. And he found polity the best form of government. Now he also rejected democracy that was present in the Athens. Unlike Plato who had given priority to the philosopher king, right, now, and rejected democracy. He rejected democracy like Plato, but unlike Plato, he preferred a typical form of government, that is called polity, right? And what is polity? The polity is a amalgamation of the oligarchy and democracy. You say that, sir, 2 bad form of government, you mixes it, how will it become a good form of government? That is a simple question, nahi? No? You know what is that?
Upper class, one is lower class, and in between you create a middle class.
How will you create middle class?
Quality is made by them. They have a relation with the upper, those from the upper side of the society and the lower side of the society. And so they can satisfy both of them. Quality government. That's what they do.
Let me explain how polity, which is a combination of the 2 bad form of government, oligarchy and democracy. Polity is basically fusion of these 2. Now, how this fusion can become better when oligarchy and democracy is combined? He said, look, of course, oligarchy and democracy both are bad form of government, but it is not that everything is bad in both the form of government. Right? Look at the good characteristics of oligarchy. What is a good characteristic of oligarchy? In oligarchy, the persons who have property is valued. In oligarchy, participation is restricted. What is characteristics of democracy? Offices are allocated on the basis of election. Rule of law is followed in democracy. Now you combine this all good characteristics, right? So polity is a golden mean of oligarchy and democracy, right? It is a kind of government of the mixed class, right? Don't use middle class, because the concept of middle class is a 17th century idea. Now I restrict my students not to use those modern word while explaining the ancient philosophy. When you explain ancient philosophy, use lots of words are there, right, to write the ideas and concepts of the ancient philosophy, whether it is a Greek or Indian, and don't use the word which we use in the modern philosophy, right? That is the best way of writing. And every philosophy, let me tell you, like every subjects have their own fragrance. Physics has its own language. History has its own language, right? Now, political philosophy has its own language. Similarly, within political philosophy, ancient philosophy has its own language, the wordology, and the modern philosophy has its own language. Got the idea? So, here the polity is actually the government of the mixed class, right? The propertied also and the person who have merit also. The polity is a government which is based on rule of law. Rule of law. And that is the best form of government. It is a fusion of oligarchy and democracy. Right? Now look at, as I told you that Aristotle's best state is the Plato's second best state. बोला था ना एक लाइन में? Right? Look at how Aristotle's best state is a Plato's second best state. Because if you look at for Plato, what is the best state for him? Ideal state. What is second best state for him? Actual state. And what is actual state? It is based on the rule of law. Making sense? Right? Yes, online students. पता चल रहा है?
Yes, sir.
पक्का ना? चलो, तो इसको थोड़ा सा लिख ले. प्रॉपर्टी लिख लेना भाई, मतलब देखो ऐसा नहीं कि मैं समझा के छोड़ देता हूं, आप उसको कवर करो. हाँ, उतना जगह छोड़ दो और उसी में लिखो, उसी में लिखो. सोचा कि भाई ज्यादा जगह हो गया तो लिख के थोड़ा जगह ब्लैंक छोड़ दो. अगर कम जगह तो राइटिंग थोड़ा छोटा छोटा कर लो. हाँ, एंड फिनिश इट इन दोज स्पेस. राइट? ऐसा नहीं कि भाई प्रॉपर्टी कहीं लिखा है, आइडिया ऑफ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन कहीं लिखा है, आइडिया ऑफ वुमेन किसी अदर पेज में लिखा है. नहीं, एक सीक्वेंस में रहना चाहिए. और ये आपको कब काम आएगा पता है? प्रीलिम्स के बाद यही नोट्स आपके रिवीजन के लिए इतना इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाएगा, राइट, कि यू विल कंसल्ट दिस अगेन एंड अगेन, राइट, एंड राइट इट अगेन अगेन, राइट, व्हेन यू गेट अदर नॉलेज टू, राइट, like knowledge of history, knowledge of society. Fine. Should I start then? The constitution? Okay. In the contemporary world, most of countries have written constitution. in the contemporary world, most of the countries have written constitution which implies written law, rules, regulations, the structure of government, and rights and obligation of citizen and obligation of citizens. In the ancient Athens, the term constitution was used in different sense. The term constitution was used in different sense. In the paragraph and write. Okay. Aristotle is known as father of constitutionalism. Aristotle is known as father of constitutionalism as he studied 158 constitution. As he studied 158 constitution. For Aristotle, constitution implied the form of government. For Aristotle, the constitution implies the form of government, the way of life, and civic virtue. And civic virtue. He argued that the end of the state depends. He argued that the end, E-N-D, end of the state depends on its citizen, and constitution. A police exists and provide good life. A police exists and provides good life as long as a police exists and provides good life as long as it is backed by its constitution. Hang on a minute and then let me tell you two interesting facts what Aristotle considered. यहां पर मैंने क्या लिखाया है कि a city exists or a police exists as long as it is backed by its constitution, or provides good life as long as it is backed by the constitution, right? Now look at, as I go now giving you example, look at Afghanistan. It had democracy from 2001, right, to 2021. It was a city which was, you know, provided a life that is called good life, and it was backed by a different types of government, democracy, right? But when government changed in 2021, August, right? Now government changed, everything changed. The concept of good life itself changed. And it exiled many who stood by democracy. पता नहीं कि कहीं पर बदल गई. Now let me tell you, Aristotle said this is a revolution. And we also agree that this is a revolution. What is a revolution? Revolution means complete change. A complete change in the system. Look at 1857 called as a revolt. कहते ना revolt. Why it is revolt? Because they wanted to change but did not make change. But they tried to change. Sometimes you do revolt in your household. मैं ऐसे नहीं करूंगा, मैं ऐसे नहीं करूंगा, बट आपको करना पड़ता है. बाद में जाकर के मम्मी पापा आपको टाइट करते हैं, and then you do it, है ना? Most of the time you do revolt at the time of marriage. मुझे ऐसे नहीं करना, मुझे वैसे नहीं करना, right? But what happens? There is suppression from all sides, and then you follow the mandate, right? Right? Now consider when you try to change the system in within your household and change to marry to someone who is not from your own community, not from your own, region, not from your own class, right? Not from your own religion. This is revolution. I know what is revolt? What is the difference between revolution and revolt? Revolution means when a system wants to replace the other system and replaces it, then it is called revolution. It is completely. That's what we call Russian revolution. We call French revolution. And we call, when it comes to the 1857, we call revolt. Right? Now look at, in 1947, we call revolution, Indian revolution. It changed the British system and established the Indian system. Right? It was a democratic revolution, like American revolution. Right? So Aristotle considered this as a revolution. The changing in the constitution means it is a revolution. Right? And when the constitution changed, even the life itself changed totally. Right? बहुत लोग तो भाग जाते हैं वहां से कि क्या करना है शहर में जब शहर ही नहीं रहा मेरे लिए. What the idea? So that was the meaning of this line which I have dictated you. And read this line again. क्या लिखवाया मैंने? A police exists and provides good life as long as it is backed by. Yeah. So a police exists as long as a police exists and provides good life as long as it is backed by its constitution. Right? Okay. Any changes in the constitution? Any changes in the constitution? Any changes in the constitution means changes in the civic virtue. Any changes in the constitution means changes in the civic virtue, the way of life, and in a state itself. In a state itself. Aristotle divided constitution in six categories. In six categories. Three are corrected form and three are deviated form. 3 are corrected form, and 3 are deviated form. Three are deviated form. The classification of the Constitution is based on the following grounds. The classification of the Constitution is based on the following grounds. The classification of the Constitution is based on following grounds. First, the number of persons involved in the government. The number of persons involved in the government. Second, the purpose of the government. The purpose of the government. That whether they are good, the purpose of the government, that whether they are good and working for the welfare of others, working for the welfare of others, as well as respect the rule of law, as well as respect the rule of law. And public opinion. Or the government is bad, or the government is bad where the public officials use the public office for the private gain. And rule the state on the basis of arbitrary decrees. And rule the state on the basis of arbitrary decrees. What is arbitrary decrees? What is arbitrary decrees? जो मन हुआ वही. हाँ, ठीक है. राजा बोला रात है, रानी बोली रात है, मंत्री बोला रात है, संतरी बोला रात है. ये सुबह सुबह की बात है. ठीक है. राइट. तो चौपट राजा होगा तो अंधेर नगरी होगी. राइट. बट जो राजा कहेगा वैसे होगा. तो क्या कि सरकार सही है या सरकार गड़बड़ है? राइट. सो दैट इज अ सेकेंड क्राइटेरिया टू डिवाइड द गवर्नमेंट. राइट. नाउ थर्ड यू राइट, third, whether the government is based on the consent of the citizen, whether the government is based on the consent of the citizen, and values tradition and norms, or the government rule by the force. Got the idea? So these are the three basic grounds on which he classified the constitution, right? And now you can make this table right? You can make this table, right? If you have already made it, just let me know. Not, then make it. Smaller table. Make this table. Force. Yes. Force. Force. Danda. Danda. In Indian philosophy, we will read Danda and Dharma. Follow Dharma and otherwise face the Danda. How Plato died. I think he died naturally. He, died natural death. Sometimes you raise this question, you people, that I never questioned in my life. मतलब मैंने कभी ऐसी तरह से सोचा नहीं कि मारा कैसे है. बट सी आई थिंक जहां तक मुझे याद है कि वो नेचुरल डेथ मरा, बहुत एज में मरा, राइट? ठीक है. अगर आपको कुछ पता हो तो आप भी बता सकते हैं. नो इशू है. सी इट्स नॉट दैट आई नो एवरीथिंग, राइट? आई डोंट come say like this, no. बहुत सारा इशू है कि दैट मैं भी कंफ्यूज हो रहा था. अच्छा ये है कि ये है कि ये है, राइट? So if you know certain facts, yeah, that let me know. Of course, teacher is a, always a learner also. I'll learn. कुछ आइडिया है कुछ स्पेशल? क्या? हाँ, पलट गए. हाँ, तो हाँ ठीक है, नेचुरल डेथ में है. कौन सी किताब है? मुखर्जी वाले. हाँ 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 हाँ, ठीक है. दिस गुड बुक, गुड बुक. इसमें सर आप क्रॉसमैन के बारे में नहीं बताए. क्रॉसमैन, हाँ, अच्छा क्या? क्रॉसमैन का किसी तो नहीं लिखा, बताया मैंने. स्टार्ट करता हूँ. Yes. Yeah. RHS Crossman we discussed in detail. Plato was anti-democratic. Plato was not good for his time, not good, not for ours. डिटेल मैंने बताया था. Right, rule of law. I remember. Yeah, did I talked about Crossman? Yes, some.
Yes, sir. Like the three people who were responsible for most of the autocratian rules in 20th century, you talked about it, sir.
Yeah. RHS Crossman we talked about, na? Ki
Yes,
RHS
sir.
Crossman is a liberal person, a liberal Democrat, right? Who criticized Plato and accused Plato that he was not democratic. And
Yeah, and
secondly,
his two
he said,
comments.
yeah, and he was not good for his own time and not for ours.
Yeah,
And he
he's
had
right.
given, several things. Look at the rule of law was there. Now, rule of law is important in 20th century, right? 21st century. Equality that was cherished in Greece, right? Plato rejected it. Then we talked about, other component like freedom that cherished in Athens. Plato subjugated individual under the authority of state. आप नहीं आए थे क्या उस दिन? He classified constitution on the basis of three properties, right? Now, right, monarchy. Right, monarchy. Aristotle argued that monarchy is justified. Aristotle argued that monarchy is justified when there is a rule of one man. Aristotle is justified when there is a rule of one man of superior moral virtue. Of superior moral virtue. It is best when the king has divine qualities. It is best when the king has divine quality and he is a symbol of wisdom. And he is a symbol of wisdom. Aristotle argue such kind of person is impossible. Such kind of person is impossible. Such kind of person is impossible. Full stop. On the other hand, when the one person rules, on the basis of arbitrary decree, and does not respect public opinion, then it is tyranny. It is not suitable for good life. It is not suitable for good and happy life. Aristotle, he argued that, look, monarchy is a rule of person who has moral superior virtue, and he's a symbol of wisdom and, like, has having divine quality, right? Like Plato has already argued about the philosopher king, right? Now Plato agreed that it is possible. Initially, if you look at the entire of his life, Plato agreed that such kind of people can be possible. The philosopher king. He tried to train, philosopher king, right? But failed later on. But look at Aristotle was a very practical man. He said this kind of person is not possible, right? And look at on the other hand, the one person who rules the state on the basis of decree, right, does not respect the consent of the people, public opinion, then it is a tyranny and it is not good suitable to provide good life. So he rejected tyranny. Making sense? On the other hand, look at aristocracy, what he talks about. Now write first, then write about aristocracy. Aristocracy is a form of government. In which few virtuous men rule the city state. Few virtuous men rule the city state. They are unconditionally the best moral person. They are unconditionally the best moral persons. They are engaged in well-being of their people. They are engaged in the well-being of the people and follow the rule of law. Okay, but when they rule for the personal gain, and do not respect the will of the people, then it transforms into oligarchy. Transformed into oligarchy. Plato rejected both form of the government. एरिस्टोटल मैंने प्लेटो बोल दिया, एरिस्टोटल मेरे मुंह से स्लिपिंग, इट वाज स्लिप ऑफ माय टंग। सबसे मजेदार होता है नेता लोग का जो स्लिप हो जाता है, और वो तो होल्ड बैक नहीं हो सकता, सब टेप कर लिया था। हाँ, हम लोग तो वापस ले लेते अपने शब्द को। When there is a slip of tongue, प्लेटो के बोले एरिस्टोटल बोला गया, right? But if you go to now Bihar election is going on, you can see, right, the speech of leaders, how media is projecting. हाँ, नीतीश कुमार, अमित शाह, सबका अभी मीडिया है। मीडिया क्या करते हैं, मीम कैसे बनता है, ऐसे ही तो बनाते हैं लोग। एनीवे, क्या लिखा, एरिस्टोटल रिजेक्टेड बोथ द फॉर्म ऑफ गवर्नमेंट। Now write about quality. Quality. क्वालिटी को अच्छे से थोड़ा लिखना है। हाँ, ज्यादातर क्वेश्चन इसी पे आता है, ठीक है, और थोड़ा आड़ा टेढ़ा करके देता है, तो कुछ आड़ा टेढ़ा नहीं करना है, हमें सीधा सीधा आंसर देना है, राइट। सो क्वालिटी को लिखना है जरा ठीक से ढंग से। देखिए, फॉर प्लेटो नहीं, फॉर एरिस्टोटल। मैं प्लेटो बोलूं, आप एरिस्टोटल समझना। एरिस्टोटल चल रहा है, एग्जैक्टली, क्योंकि एरिस्टोटल चल रहा है। For Aristotle, Plato is the quality is the best form of government. For Aristotle, quality is the best form of government. It is a fusion of oligarchy. It is a fusion of oligarchy and democracy. It is a practical constitution. It is a practical constitution. It is a practical constitution for the ordinary citizens, for the ordinary citizens, for the ordinary citizens to secure good and happy life. To secure good and happy life. Right? Now change the paragraph and write, लिखिए, polity is a mixed constitution. Polity is a mixed constitution and based on the golden mean. And based on golden mean. मीन MEAN, गोल्डन मीन। अरे मीन निकालते थे ना हम मैथमेटिक्स में, 10th में, याद है? हाँ, जितना निकाले उसका डिवाइडेड बाय 2 कर देते थे, रिमेंबर 10th में मीन था हमारे, वहां पर भी होगा, बेसिक मैथमेटिक्स है, मीन मोड मीडियन। हाँ, 10th थी, हाँ, यू हैड साइंस, ओके फाइन, या, सो 10th में वी स्टडीड मीन मीडियन मोड। एनीवे, सो इट इज अ गोल्डन मीन, right? And the constitution of mixed class. And the constitution of mixed class. Methodologically, it combines the best practices of oligarchy and best practices of democracy. And best practices of democracy. Now write best practices in oligarchy. Give a separate subtitle. Best practices in oligarchy. Best practices in oligarchy. Now first you write respect for the wealthy. Respect for the wealthy. Second you write restricted participation. Restricted participation. Now write best practices in democracy. Best practices in democracy. Yeah, best practices in oligarchy, that is wealthy or respect for wealthy person. Respect for wealthy person. Second is restricted participation. Yes, Soumya, what is a
Yes,
good characteristics of oligarchy? हाँ बोलो.
written sir. आप बोला था.
Restriction, not restrictive. Restriction मतलब होता है it is not allowed for everyone, right? Only the person who possesses property is allowed in oligarchy, right? डेमोक्रेसी में क्या है, सबको वोटिंग राइट दे दो, किसी को पता भी नहीं है तो भी वोट गिराएंगे. No, he did not like. He said democracy is like a mobocracy. For Aristotle, democracy is a mobocracy, and let me tell you, none of the Greek philosophers liked democracy. Right? Aristotle said it is a mobocracy. Right? When a demagogue uses rhetoric and captures power. Right? Now, if you look at his teacher Plato, he never liked democracy. Right? His dislike was democracy so much so that he created an ideal state. Right? And look at Socrates. Socrates used to say that democracy is the rule of fool. Rule of fool. मूर्खों का शासन है ये. Right? So look at, none of the Greek philosophers liked democracy. Right? Anyway, now write best practices in democracy. Right? First, characteristics. Offices are allocated on the basis of election. Offices are allocated on the basis of election. Second, the rule of law. The rule of law. Third, inclusion. What is democracy? Democracy includes more and more. Inclusion. Fourth, the rule of majority. Now write in paragraph form. Change the paragraph and write, okay. Quality is the combination of the best practices of oligarchy. Quality is the combination of the best practices of oligarchy and the best practices of democracy to deal with collective affairs of the state. to deal with the collective affair of the state. It should allow more and more person to involve in the government. It should allow more and more person in the government. Yet, it should be allowed to only moral and virtuous man. Yet, it should be allowed to moral and only moral and virtuous man. I mean, yeah, I'm talking about the man as a social community. So look at polity he talked about. It is a mixed form of government and mixed of the oligarchy and democracy. Right? Now, what is characteristics of the polity? The good characteristics of the both, that is the characteristics of the polity, the rule of law. Right? Now, if you look at democracy, as I told you that democracy never liked by the Greek philosophers. Now, till 17th century, let me tell you, before John Locke, no philosopher liked democracy. Thomas Hobbes did not like democracy. He said democracy and anarchy are the same. Right? And he rejected democracy and supported absolute monarchy. Got the idea? So with this I will end, and I'll take up in the next class the further ideas of Aristotle.